Thank you so much for coming here today. So we'll go through some speeches, some videos from Marge and other esteemed guests as well. The first video that I'd like to introduce is called Our Victorious Tirobhava by His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami. So
Prabhupada's biography, Lilamrita. It's very important to get to know about Srila Prabhupada, what Srila Prabhupada has achieved, how Srila Prabhupada has achieved what he has achieved is remarkable. And it is going to become a history in the course of time. No one has ever achieved whatever Prabhupada has achieved in the past. In the past, no one achieved what Prabhupada achieved. There are big heroes in the world who went out to conquer the world, but all of them failed. Now, the first one to try to conquer the world was Alexander the Great. He went from Greece, Macedonia, all the way to India. Alexander died in Persia. And you know why he died? He died of his heart failure because his dream was shattered. His dream was to conquer India. Because his idea was to conquer India would be synonymous to conquering the world. Anyway, so there are many. Another person who wanted to conquer the world was Napoleon. And in this way, there are various people who tried to conquer the world but didn't succeed. But there is one person who succeeded in conquering the world. Tell me, who is that?
Srila Prabhupada.
Right. Srila Prabhupada is the only person who succeeded in conquering the world. And he didn't do it with the sword. He did not try to do it with military power. He did it with love and knowledge, wisdom. And he conquered in such a way that although he left, his influence or his domain is increasing, becoming more and more wider. Right? Like there are areas which were not conquered by Prabhupada. He went and made the arrangements for conquering, like for example Russia or Eastern European bloc, which was behind Iron Curtain before. Another difficult country was the Muslim countries. They don't allow any other religion to be practiced. Like if Alexander conquered the world, what would have done? He would have spread his influence, isn't it? Now, Prabhupada, what did he do? He established his ideology, Krishna consciousness. But how did he do it? Without any bloodshed. It's a transcendental revolution without any bloodshed. The old system is gone, new system came in. And that's what's going to happen. Eventually, all over the world. And what is the culture? No meat eating. Today's world is full of meat eating. No intoxication, no illicit sex, no gambling. And chant Hare Krishna, meaning become devotees of Krishna.
A few years back, some devotees from some other mutt, they were saying Prabhupada did not give everything. So we have to go to them to get the higher stuff. Now, when we understand this, can we conclude that Prabhupada gave us everything? Isn't it? Rather, those who are saying that Prabhupada didn't give everything, they didn't understand what Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to give. That actually shows that they do not know. That's why they spoke like that. Prabhupada gave us everything. Actually, 2 years back, when we had the ILS, ISKCON Leadership Sangha, I actually gave a seminar on that. Srila Prabhupada gave us everything, including Raganuga Bhakti. And the point was this is what I actually presented, more elaborately with more scriptural evidence and all. Just in short, I just mentioned it now. Therefore, never ever think that Prabhupada didn't give everything. What Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to give, Srila Prabhupada gave it in a perfect way. Those who think that Prabhupada didn't give everything and they have to go somewhere else, they are very, very unfortunate. They are making a very serious mistake. So I will request you all not to ever make that mistake. That's why I tell everybody, never leave ISKCON.
I'd like to introduce the first speaker for today. She's a disciple of His Divine Grace Tirobhava, who spent time with him during the 70s as his photographer. She also assisted her husband, His Grace Yadavarabhu, in producing an award-winning film, Hare Krishna, the mantra, the movement, the Swami who started it all. And now we are fortunate to have her love and guidance. So please welcome Her Grace Vishaka Prabhu, who will now speak a few words. Haribo!
Srimate Bhakti Charu Swami. Namaste Saraswati Devi. Gauravani Krishna Nirvasesha Sundari Pasyati Deshatana. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda. Advaita Vedanta Shivasati Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Recording in progress.
Vanshakota Tiruvasya. Kripa Sindhu Devacha Patitanam Bhavane Thank you so much for inviting me to this very auspicious program. It's wonderful to be together after so long of being in our homes with our computers. And I was reflecting that we have so much in common by Srila Prabhupada's grace. The culture that we've applied to our lives, the mantras we chant, the bhajans we sing, even the clothes we wear, what we honor. And now, sadly, we also have in common that we're in separation from our spiritual master. So reflecting on that separation from our spiritual master, I wrote a few words of reflection in honor of our spiritual master. One of life's most painful experiences is bereavement from the spiritual master, our guide, our friend, our example. When the spiritual master passes on, grief empties us. The darkness of his passing casts a long shadow over our days, but life moves forward anyway. Our loss becomes part of us, and sometimes spurred by a particular Hare Krishna melody or a uniquely pronounced word, a familiar story or a joke, we remember our spiritual master more acutely. The pain of losing such a personality cannot be gotten through, gotten over, gotten past. This is forever after pain. We acknowledge this pain and allow it to be. We look at what our Guru did on losing his Guru, and his resolve to continue fills us with the resolve to also continue, despite everything. And it's that very resolve that powerfully summons Krishna's mercy on our unworthy lives. We find friends who share our feelings. We fill our emptiness with remembrance of our spiritual master's qualities, activities, instructions. In separation from him, we followers unite. Together, we refuse to stagnate and languish. We refuse complacency. From our shared pain of separation arises the harmony of shared love, shared hope, shared goals, shared values, and a vision for the future that we can also share. Our fortitude and purposes are strengthened. We're enthused to connect with each other, care for each other, and contribute to the mission our spiritual master dedicated his life to. We simply try in these ways, and perhaps Sri Krishna's magic acts. Perhaps we evoke some vivid aspect of our spiritual master's presence. Srila Prabhupada writes, the disciple and the spiritual master are never separated, because the spiritual master always keeps company with the disciple, as long as the disciple follows strictly the instructions of the spiritual master. So the key question becomes, what does it mean to strictly follow the spiritual master's instructions? The word strict may evoke the idea of military discipline. That aspect is real. This strictness is to free us from the iron-like grip of greed and lust. This strictness is to usher us into a life with less false ego, a life of selfless service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The spiritual master's instructions are meant to bring us a life full of joy. In the beginning of the Gita, Arjuna said that he could not dispel the grief that was drying up his senses. No amount of material well-being would help him. Sri Krishna replied that Arjuna was mourning for what is not worthy of grief. We, however, are mourning for what is worthy of grief. For we are mourning the passing of a Vaishnava. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami tells us that of all kinds of unhappiness and pain, there is none greater than separation from a devotee of Krishna. We are solaced in knowing that as much as we follow our spiritual master, that much he is with us and will always be so. We want to strictly follow him in spirit, the same spirit that made him so dear to us. What our spiritual master wants most, or what will please him the most, is for us to be happy in Krishna consciousness. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Madhuvishaka. I just wanted to say a story that involves Madhuvishaka. In 1999, we were filming in Paris, and she had a youngest daughter with her. She was like, is it Haripriya? And she was 8 or 9, so a little kid. And Maharaj is filming, he's directing a shot on the streets of Paris, and then he's sitting down, giving direction. Yadavara Prabhu's there. And then her daughter just jumps on Maharaj's lap. Just jumps on his lap. And we're like, oh, God. But he doesn't say, get off me. He just lets her sit on the lap. He doesn't want to hurt her feelings. And then the scene finishes, and then she naturally gets off the lap. And I thought, how mature, how amazing that was. I thought he would freak out, but he didn't freak out. He just allowed the young girl to just jump on his lap and watch because you have a camera shot and you have a TV screen, and she's watching with Maharaj. So thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So the next video, I'd like to introduce is by His Holiness Shivam Maharaj. So I'd just like to say a few words about him and his relationship with Maharaj. So he joined in 1973, and also through his teachings, books, classes, we know how amazing he is. One of the things that connected him with His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami was talking about Vaishnava etiquette and how we should imbibe that in our lives, and also move that forward with the future generations to come. And another thing was how to build more organic, self-sustaining farms, because that's how we can teach people to. People might think that it's going backwards, but now, as you can see, veganism is coming up in the future, but also it's also teaching people about how to live and how to use Mother Earth properly. So I'll just like, if it is ready. Yeah, thank you so much, and please.
Namamushtabharaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Vicharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschachati Shatarine Vanchakalpatarubhyasya Kripasindhuveva Chapitam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavevi Namo Namaha. We first met sometime in 1980, at which time His Holiness was visiting the UK. I had also just come to the UK, and that was 1980. I'd come from America, and of course he was a Indian sannyasi, Indian devotee, which was still relatively rare at that time in ISKCON. But I do remember that we really started to bond in the following year. Now, I had a friend who I'd known from Chicago, my godbrother Shravananda Prabhu, who since has passed away. And he fundraised for Calcutta and Mayapur in India, and he came to Chicago, and I got to know him in Chicago. He was the one who arranged to have my deities Dalnitai Gorhari carved, my beautiful little Gornitai deities. Not so little, but... And it was in 1980 that I asked him to do that, and in 1981, I went to Calcutta to collect them. He had them there. They weren't fully painted as yet. Rancho Prabhu completed the painting when we brought them back to the UK. He was residing at BBT at that time, and he was serving in the BBT, of which Bhakti Charu Maharaj was in charge. Now I'm talking about the Bengali BBT, which was centered in Calcutta. And they had a premises, a building. I was staying there. I loved Calcutta. It was almost like home for me. And then, needless to say, Bhakti Charu Maharaj was there. And I remember a car ride. We'd gone somewhere, and he was telling me about the instructions Srila Prabhupada had given him for translating his books into Bengali. And there were typical issues. I can't remember what they were, but he was dealing with those at the time. So I was staying there. From there, I took the deities to Puri. And then there was Mayapur Festival, and Vrindavan, Mayapur Festival, and then after Mayapur Festival, and I came back to Calcutta. We had very interesting discussions. There was still at that time some difficulty, disagreement between the members of Sridhar Swami Maharaj, godbrother of B.R. Sridhar, of Srila Prabhupada and ISKCON. And he had a good relationship. He knew Sridhar Swami Maharaj from earlier. He had gone to him and so on. And we had some talks about that situation. I remember having discussions about cosmology. I had Gornitai, but I had nothing to travel with them, especially to bring them back to the UK. So Maharaj immediately offered, in his very typical hospitality, hospitable way, that I'll get my carpenter, and I'll get him to make a nice box. So carpenter came and he made a box. Boy, did he ever make a box! I mean, that thing was 10 kilos. And I was carrying it as hand luggage, and the deities were inside. Well, they were certainly safe. We bonded at that time. We became friends. And thereafter, he would visit the UK regularly. There was once ISKCON UK went through its second trauma. There was a question of who would be GBC, and the GBC were suggesting that he should be the GBC of the UK. Local devotees at last minute asked that I be. Actually, they already voted Bhakti Charu Maharaj as the GBC, or proposed him. And then at the last minute, these messages came through, and as they said, I should do it. I really didn't want to get into a GBC service. I knew what it was going to entail, because I'd been sitting in GBC meetings for the last, that was 87, so for the last 6 years. And but anyway, then I did accept that. So then Maharaj wasn't particularly involved, but he used to come and visit, and I asked him once. We used to talk about Chaitanya Charitamrita. I loved to hear him speak Bengali. I mean, many people spoke Bengali, but the way Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj spoke Bengali, for me, it was like music. That's what I envisaged Chaitanya Charitamrita Bengali to sound like. And once I asked him, I said, Maharaj, I'd like to, you have now disciples in India, in Calcutta. I'd really like you to introduce me to some real aristocratic Bengalis. So he said, okay. And sometime later, he sent me the address. When you go to India, go to these devotees' place. And I did go to India. I didn't go alone. There was about a dozen of us. And we went to those devotees who may know them. We went to Chaitanya Das's house, Chaitanya Das, Malini, etc. Now, their house wasn't the house that you see now, which is a big 4-story building in full bagan, which is a 10-minute drive from the airport. It was very convenient. It was just a 2-room house. There was Malini, Chaitanya Das, then Rukmini, and at that time he was Babai, now Chir Jivan Krishna Das. And we showed up, 10 of us, at this little house. I thought I was, I asked to see some aristocratic Bengalis. I thought I was going to come to a palace. But here I was in a little house, and in the garage of that house was a Montessori school. And that's what Malini was running, a Montessori school. But they put us up. We were there for the whole night. We got to meet Chaitanya Das, who was such a wonderful person, and then he became a real close friend, and the whole family. And of course, they fed everybody a wonderful feast. And somehow, I don't know how, we all stayed there for the night. In 1997 or 96, for the centennial, we had 300 devotees, 250 Hungarians and 50 Russian, Kazakh devotees, and myself and Govinda Maharaj, and we all flew in to Chaitanya Das's house. And he arranged accommodations down the street in people's homes and everything. It was fantastic. I remember him bringing 5 buses to the airport. My point is that Bhakti Charu Maharaj really loved these devotees, and they were very, very close. And usually when I stayed there, if Maharaj wasn't there, I would stay in his room, I would stay in his bed, which unfortunately for me was a little short because there was a lot of difference between me and Bhakti Charu Maharaj. And, but as always, it was a wonderful accommodation. I was the GBC chairman. So what you all know is Bhakti Charu Maharaj's accommodations in Mayapur, that literally that whole floor, that suite of many rooms. I used to stay there. I used to stay there with quite a few devotees that came from the UK. There was Tamal Krishna Maharaj and Harikesh Maharaj, and I think I was there or one over. Now, Tamal Krishna Maharaj, Bhakti Charu Maharaj had a very close relationship because when Bhakti Charu Maharaj joined, first actually he was with Bhavananda Maharaj, and then when Prabhupada saw this Bengali devotee, Prabhupada took him in, and Tamal Krishna Maharaj came in March or February, and he took Bhakti Charu Maharaj under his wing. So from that time until Tamal Krishna Maharaj left our association, our company, he was like his older brother, his Shiksha Guru. They had a very intimate relationship. Sometimes Tamal Krishna Maharaj would be very strong with Bhakti Charu Maharaj. He would correct him. He really raised him. He trained him. If you listen to the 1977 tapes, there are many exchanges, there are many things that Srila Prabhupada and Tamal Krishna Maharaj are talking and mentioning about first Gopinath, and then later he becomes Bhakti Charu Swami. I think it was Rabindra Swarup Prabhu who coined the nickname Sweetie. He would give different nicknames sometimes to devotees. So yes, Bhakti Charu Maharaj was a real sweetie. Prabhupada, he'd ask Prabhupada once, Srila Prabhupada, what happens when, how will I realize my Swarup if you're absent, if you're not here? So Srila Prabhupada said, well, when the time comes, when you're ready, I'll come and I'll reveal it to you. So now he's gone, he's moved on. I always found that to be very important information in terms of my own personal spiritual practices and very inspirational. And he's no longer with us in the same way that he was before. I probably think of him more than I thought of him then. He, Tamal Krishna Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada. These are the devotees that I think often about, that I miss. There's not many sweeties, or there's not many sweet devotees who are as sweet as he was. He was a real sweetie. Hare Krishna. Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Jai Nitai Gaur Premanandi. Hari 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 Bol.
So just before we do the kirtan, I just wanted to say a story. It's about Maharaj's care. It's about Maharaj's care. And it's personal to me. So there was like hundreds of devotees in Ujjain temple, and I didn't turn up for Mangalati. I just was too tired. Yeah. And I was living in Maharaj's quarters at the time, so I thought, yeah, I can't get up. So then Guru Maharaj finished the Mangalati. He would always go Mangalati, and then he came back. Then he called me to his room. And then he called a few other God brothers who didn't turn up for Mangalati. And he said, I noticed you didn't turn up for Mangalati. And I went, how did you know? Because there's hundreds of devotees, it's a festival. But he knew I didn't turn up. Nobody told him, he just could tell. And then I said, I'm so sorry, Guru Maharaj. And he said, look, whenever you are at an ISKCON temple, you must attend Mangalati, period. You don't miss Mangalati, it's the most auspicious thing to do. So then, this is a bit political, but basically there was a point in the God Brother and God Sister history where we weren't allowed to just turn up to programs. You had to be invited to come to a Bhakti Charu Swami program. It never was done before, but they implemented that rule because there was too many of us. So I deliberately caused this problem. So there was a God sister, she had this program, we all knew about it, but we weren't invited, so I didn't turn up, you know. And I dropped one of the God brothers to the program. He was from Calcutta, I dropped him over. And then Guru Maharaj was in the program, and he could see there was half the crowd, and he didn't see all the regulars, and he said, what happened? And then he asked the God sister, did you invite everyone? And she goes, yeah, I invited everyone. Obviously she didn't. Then he asked Babai, Chiranjeev, who's at the back, he said, how did you come to the program? Because he has no car. Oh, he said, Dina Krishna dropped me. So how come he didn't come in? Oh, he wasn't invited, Guru Maharaj. Then he takes the phone, and I'm in Asda right now, shopping for him. He calls me up, and he starts screaming at me, why didn't you come to this program? What is the point of me coming to England if you can't come to programs like this? And he started, and I was in ecstasy. I wasn't crying or upset. I was in love because he cared for me, that he was willing to call me up. I said, what can I do, Guru Maharaj? This is the rule they made. They're stopping us from coming to see you. And then, it wasn't you. I hope it wasn't anyway. So then I just, I started outpouring my heart. Guru Maharaj, we were serving you in 1999, we were in and out your rooms, we could do anything, and now they put this rule, we can't even visit you when you're formally here. And then he said, okay, so the next day he has a meeting. So now he's calling the big guns like Radhavinoda Prabhu, Harivamsa Prabhu, Rameshwara Prabhu, Naveen Prabhu, me and a few others. And then I thought he was going to chastise the hell out of all of us and say, what's your problem? Can't you get together? Why can't you organize yourself? But he was so humble, he just wanted to mediate and pour his heart out that, look, we have to cooperate, we have to love each other, we have to appreciate each other. And I couldn't believe how he just softened everyone's hearts. So that's an aspect, just a small aspect of his care and compassion. So now I'd like to introduce Radhavinoda Prabhu.
Who was the first one to swap you?
who's actually the one who organized this program with the assistance of many devotees. And it's his brainchild, and he wanted to do this to glorify his spiritual master. And he's such an intimate associate of Bhakti Charu Swami. He can tell you hours and hours of all that association. So, Krishna Jingala.
Definitely, they're both on me to stop me. I confess. Okay. Krishna jinka naam hai, गोकुल जिनका धाम है, ऐसे भगवान को बारंबार प्रणाम जिनका नाम है, गोकुल जिनका दाम है, ऐसे भगवान को बारंबार प्रणाम है। यशोदा जिनकी मैया है, नंद जी बतैया है, ऐसे की गोपाल को बारंबार प्रणाम है। यशोदा जिनकी मैया है, नंद जी बतैया है, ऐसे की गोपाल को बारंबार प्रणाम है। जिनका नाम है, गोकुल जिनका दाम है, ऐसे भगवान को बारंबार प्रणाम है। राधा जिनकी जाया है, अद्भुत जिनकी माया है, ऐसे की घनश्याम को बारंबार प्रणाम है।
राधा जिनकी जया है, अद्भुत उनकी माया है, ऐसे श्री घनश्याम को बारंबार प्रणाम है।
राधा जिनकी जाया है, अद्भुत इनकी माया है, ऐसे घनश्याम को बारंबार प्रणाम है।
राधा जिनकी जया है, अद्भुत उनकी माया है, ऐसे श्री घनश्याम को बारंबार प्रणाम है।
जिनका नाम है, गोकुल जिनका लुट लुट दही माखन खायो, बाल बाल धन दैन चढ़ायो, ऐत लीला दाम तोरिया, बारंबार प्रणाम है।
लूट लूट दधी माखन खायो, ग्वाल बाल संग धेनु चरायो, ऐसे लीला धाम को बारंबार प्रणाम है।
लुट लुट दही माखन खायो, ग्वाल बाल धन दैन चढ़ायो, ऐत लीला दाम तोरिया, बारंबार प्रणाम है।
लूट लूट दधी माखन खायो, ग्वाल बाल संग धेनु चरायो, ऐसे लीला धाम को बारंबार प्रणाम है।
कृष्णा जिनका नाम है, गोकुल जिनका दाम है, गोपी बलवान को बारंबार प्रणाम है।
कृष्णा जिनका नाम है, गोकुल जिनका धाम है, ऐसे श्री भगवान को बारंबार प्रणाम है।
हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे।
हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे।
हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे हरे, हरे राम राम हरे हरे। बोलिए भक्त चरु महाराज की जय।
Hare Krishna. So this bhajan is actually quite close to my heart because apparently for the first 3 years of my life I used to know Maharaj as the Krishna Jinka Naam Hai Maharaj. And actually one program that Maharaj came to, and I must have been about 3, maybe 4, and I saw Maharaj and he was just about to sing and I must have said out loud, oh, he's just about to sing Krishna Jinka Naam, and Maharaj heard me. And he started laughing and he actually sang the bhajan afterwards as well. But this is just kind of, he was so affectionate to all the children. And growing up in his, I wouldn't call it his shadow because it's not, it's just growing up in his love. It's been amazing, and I think all the kids can say that have grown up knowing Maharaj, that he was so affectionate to everyone, and anything that we said, he didn't take that to heart. He always took that as a joke, and he always taught us in that way as well. Then when he started to get to know us, and he would be strict afterwards as well. But I would like to now, we would like to now show another video of Maharaj and how he came to Krishna consciousness.
Many of my friends, especially the Americans, they had a gross misconception that India was a very poor country. And that used to hurt my pride. Although when I was in India, I used to think that West was the best. But after going to the West, I started to develop some attachment, some appreciation, some love for my motherland. And that actually made me start to read books about India. And as I started to read those books, I started to develop a deep appreciation for Indian culture, Indian philosophy, which eventually led to India's spiritualism. So I decided to come back to India mainly to find a guru. I also I went to some of the ashrams, I also met other sadhus, but I was thinking, it kind of made me feel that all their pursuits were quite materialistic. They were not really leading to any spiritual objective. Their goal was not set. They themselves did not know what they wanted. But eventually I gave up my search, and it was around that time when I came back to Calcutta at my father's place. I got a book by Srila Prabhupada, by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The book was The Nectar of Devotion. It was the English translation of Rupa Goswami's Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Srila Prabhupada translated that into English. And when I started to read that, then everything became so clear. Everything became crystal clear. Prabhupada, practically from the first page, I had two amazing realizations. I would say realizations, because they came with such profound clarity. And those two things was that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of God. God is a person. Prior to that, I did not have any clear understanding of God. I was pursuing an impersonalistic way of spiritual search. But Prabhupada made it so clear, just in few words, that God is a person and He is Krishna. Now, from my childhood, I was attached to Krishna. But nobody ever told me that Krishna is God. I did not have any understanding of God, so there was no consideration that Krishna was God. But Srila Prabhupada made this point so clear that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of God. God is a person, He is the Supreme Person. He is the Supreme Creator, He is the Supreme Maintainer. And He is taking care of all of us. So all these informations came with such profound clarity that I began to realize that this is what I was looking for. And the next night, I actually had a dream. And I dreamt of Srila Prabhupada. And that was it. Just the sight of Srila Prabhupada. I saw him in a very amazing way. I saw him sitting on a throne. And there was a brilliant light coming out of his body. And just that sight made me realize that finally I found my spiritual master. And then also I was very fortunate, like when I met Srila Prabhupada, he allowed me to stay with him. He gave me a service which actually needed me to enabled me to be close to him. At our first meeting, Srila Prabhupada gave me the service of translating his books into Bengali. And at that time, Srila Prabhupada had about 10,000 followers. To even get close to Srila Prabhupada was difficult, what to speak of being with him. And although I came to his lotus feet quite late, but I had the good fortune of being with him all the time, practically. And eventually Srila Prabhupada made me his secretary for Indian affairs. And this way I had the good fortune of serving him till he left this planet. Thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
I will just say another story about compassion and care. So I was in Deland, that's where Maharaj's base is, in America, Florida, next to Orlando, 40 minutes from Orlando. So he has a farm community, and it's full of, deadly creatures, like snakes and scorpions and man-eating ants and an alligator in the lake, and then sometimes bears come into the property. So I didn't know about that when I walked into the property. So I started sleeping on the floor, and then they told me off that you don't need to sleep on the floor, there's something on the floor. So I had to make sure I slept on the bed. But one of our godbrothers got bitten by a spider. And if you don't treat it, it becomes very, very nasty. And so he just started to have nausea, vomiting, and then after several hours he tells Guru Maharaj, "Oh, I was bitten by a spider." And Maharaj blasted him because how can you hide that fact from us? Do you know where you are? Because he was from India, he didn't know. I said, "We are in Deland, which is full of all these poisonous spiders. You got bitten by one of them. We need to take you immediately to a doctor." So Guru Maharaj went in the car, we all went in his car, went all the way to CVS, some pharmacy, which is like as big as this room. And then we got him the antibiotics, we took him to the doctor, but the whole time he was concerned because he was his secretary, and he was so concerned, and he chastised the hell out of him, but he just told him that you've got to take care of your body, you've got to inform us straight away when something like this happens, because people can die or get amputation if this poison spread. And so I saw that aspect of his compassion. Are you ready yet? Right, so the next story, I can go on now. The next one is still in Deland. So Guru Maharaj wanted to have a van, a vegan van. A van that goes into the university campuses and sells prasadam. That was his mood. He wanted to go out and outreach to the university college students. So he took me to the place where they were building this tailor-made van. And so I went with him, and then he got this Ayurvedic doctor to come with him. I was thinking, what's he coming for? So then I didn't know, I just didn't understand what was happening. So he speaks to the director of the company and his wife, and they're having a nice chat. And then he goes, "Oh, by the way, I brought a doctor here because I heard one of your colleagues has a heart condition." And they were like, "Oh my God," he remembered that conversation that we had, that one of our senior colleagues has a heart condition. And so and they all started crying. Even I cried, I had to hide myself. But everyone started crying because they couldn't believe the compassion he had to just bring in an Ayurvedic doctor to treat one of the colleagues, not the actual bosses. And so this doctor started treating the whole staff. And I was just flabbergasted, and I was thinking, oh, Guru Maharaj is so kind. You're thinking of your own disciples, you're thinking of the Prabhupada disciples, you're thinking of the GBC management, yet you have time to think about a colleague of one of the directors. So that's what Guru Maharaj was like. We were in Jagannath Puri one day, that's another story. This was 2006 when Radhanath Swami had his huge party, he was there. And there's like 1 million people on the street. I've never seen 1 million people on the street, and it's 45 degrees heat. So then Guru Maharaj is on the balcony, and then it all subsides, the ruts go past, and then I go to collect him, and then we need to get a rickshaw now to get back to our hotel, and there's like 1 million people on the street. And how are you going to find a rickshawwala? So luckily there was a rickshawwala who was just about to go in, but then he saw 2 Matajis who didn't have a lift. So he was willing to sacrifice his lift to give it to them so that he could wait. Obviously they didn't allow that, but I just thought to myself, he's not thinking of himself, he's always thinking of the service of the Vaishnavas. But then His Holiness Chandramauli Maharaj came, I remember, vividly came, and he spoke to us, spoke to the group, and he made us feel calm and relaxed and gave us the reality of the situation, and explained to us that when the spiritual master does go through a situation like that, or any apparent external sufferings, then we as disciples need to step up and improve ourselves and improve our sadhana so that we can avoid causing more and more pain or suffering, external suffering to the spiritual master. So I really appreciated that, Maharaj, that you did that, and it helped us so much. Maharaj, I don't know if you know that he also preaches or gives Krishna consciousness to those who are in prison in America. You know, and it's very difficult to do a service like that. To go in time and time again, to take care of people who, you know, committed crimes or heinous crimes, and go and give your mercy and kindness and compassion. Preaches practically all over the world. And we're very fortunate that he's come today to this event. Naturally, a few days ago we had Jankinath Prabhu's funeral, and Maharaj came for that, and we're blessed that he's come today. So I'd like to welcome His Holiness Chandramani Maharaj.
Hare Krishna. Panchakalpa, Kiripuscha, Kripa Sindhu, Pyevacha, Patitanam Bhavanebhyo, Vaishnavabhyo, Namo Namaha. We've heard so much, and there's much more that we didn't hear about the glories and the contributions that Bhakti Charu Maharaj had made to spread Krishna consciousness everywhere, all around the world. And how he did that was his deep love for Srila Prabhupada, along with his natural compassion towards each and every living entity. My personal experiences with Maharaj were quite instructive for me. And that's how I can define it. It was something that I always saw myself as a chance to learn more, and at the same time to associate with such an exalted personality. And some of those things that I learned were corrective. Maharaj was making sure that things were done in the right philosophical or just in the proper way. One time, we were at a Rath Yatra with Chicago, and we had, there was actually 6 sannyasis at that particular Rath Yatra. And Maharaj was leading much of the kirtan. And as we were concluding the Rath Yatra and going to the tent site where we were going to have the festival, he handed me the microphone at the end, which means now it's over. And then he looked at me, and I could understand he wanted me to, because everyone was getting down, so he wanted me to do the pranams. So I decided not to do the whole pranams. I decided to say, Panchakalpa Kirubhishcha, Kripa Sindhu Evacha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo. And here's where I blew it. I said, Shri Vaishnave Namo Namaha. I added the word Shri. Immediately, Maharaj got up and said, Chandramani Swami is glorifying only the Shri Vaishnavas. And what can I do? I just don't know how to say now. So since then, I haven't made that mistake. So Maharaj wanted to make sure that things were done according to Shastra and according to the proper Vaishnava procedure. So I was very much appreciating that particular connection. And the way he said it was sweet, but it was really straight to the heart. So it was more than just like, I'm not just correcting you, I'm telling you something you should learn, continually. Get it right. So I appreciated that. when I would see Maharaj, I would get a little nervous. And not, in a way that was, here he comes, and he's going to embrace me again. And I was thinking, I like it, but at the same time, I'm not qualified to accept that embrace from such an exalted personality. But he was so loving, so caring, and so friendly, and so personal. And that really used to bring me to like speechlessness. I couldn't really respond to such love and compassion and concern and personalism coming from such an exalted personality. Even though we were godbrothers, I always saw him as my spiritual master. And I learned so much from him in that. My first meeting with Maharaj was really transformative for me. It was in New Vrindavan. It was in 1980. Of course, I had been in New Vrindavan since the beginning when I joined in 1973. And so I wasn't really able to really associate with much of the senior devotees around the movement, unless they actually came to New Vrindavan, because I never left there for many, many years. And Maharaj came. And I had just happened to have the service of being Srila Prabhupada's pujari at the palace, Prabhupada's palace of gold. And so now Maharaj came. He also came with Hamsadutta Prabhu, Hamsadutta Maharaj. And he wanted to cook for Prabhupada. And how much he loved to cook for Prabhupada. You all know how many stories of how Prabhupada really asked him to cook, instructed him to cook, and taught him how to cook, and corrected him in his cooking to make everything just the way Prabhupada liked it. So he was so enthusiastic to cook that day. So Nanda Kumar Prabhu, Nanda Kumar Prabhu, at the time was Prabhupada's cook, and I was the pujari. So here I'm meeting this personality for the first time, and I had heard much about him, and I was thinking, well, here is Bhakti Charu Maharaj. I get a chance to do some service. So he's there. He gets immediately into the kitchen and he cooks this huge, grand display of varieties of foodstuffs for Srila Prabhupada. It was just a regular day, but he cooked huge foods. And he was to give it to me so I could put it on the altar in front of Srila Prabhupada's palace. Now Prabhupada's palace is Prabhupada's on the altar, and he's there, and that he's the only deity in the entire temple. So I put it on the altar, and Maharaj walks onto the altar, right during the offering. And he comes on the altar, and then he sees something, which I had seen every day, but he saw it in a completely different way. It was this little tom-tom drum that Prabhupada had when he started the movement in New York City. The original drum was at Thompson Square Park in 1965. Prabhupada used to use that to have his outdoor kirtans with his fledgling disciples at that time. Bhakti Charu Maharaj did something like that. What is he doing? I couldn't understand it. He takes the drum off the altar and he embraces the drum. And he's getting really emotional. And he said, this drum began the Hare Krishna movement worldwide. And he's looking at it and he's just like, I wanted to give him the drum, but I didn't have the authority to do that. It was so emotional and so glorificational when it came to singing that drum. It was such heart-rending for me. After that, my whole feeling towards that drum was completely different. I saw it as a deity. And he actually treated it just like a deity. So I learned much from him. And then, of course, we finished the activities, And then he left, but he forgot to take his socks. He took them off and left them in the area where you change your clothes before you enter the altar. So I thought, I'm not giving them back. I felt a little guilty because I don't usually do that. But I thought, this is a rare opportunity. And it must have been Krishna's arrangement for me. So I accepted it in that way. So I kept those socks for many, many years. And then somebody asked me for them because they found out, and I gave it to them. I think it was one of the largest disciples. So that was a real heartwarming experience for me and opened my eyes to such a great personality. And after that we had so many wonderful experiences. One thing I learned about Maharaj that I didn't know was when we were in Chicago in 2001, when the 9/11 happened, we were both there at the temple together. We actually watched the whole thing on television together. And so we were watching it and discussing it, and we were hearing that airports are just practically closing down, and all the restrictions are becoming tighter and tighter, and very few airlines were flying, and people were not flying. There was anxiety about what would happen. So both of us were scheduled to leave and to go on to our preaching engagements. So I said to Maharaj, Maharaj, I don't think it's so safe now to go traveling, because it's still a little dangerous. There's a lot of restrictions, and there's talk about more types of similar attacks. He looked at me like, you don't know much. I could agree with that. So he looked at me and he said something really powerful. He said, a coward dies 1,000 deaths, a hero dies once. And then the next day he was gone, traveling. Maharaj was, he was really, really fearless. A real sense of Lord. And we saw that so many times. How he took control of the whole New York situation in a very powerful and fearless way. That's a whole long story. That's worth hearing. But I won't tell it now because it's such a detailed story. How he changed the whole situation around and brought the temple back to ISKCON. That was a beautiful dude. And he acted in a very fearless way in a very, very volatile situation. So maybe someone can tell that story. I don't know all the details, I wasn't there, but the way it's described, complete fearlessness, complete dedication to Srila Prabhupada's way of organizing our Krishna consciousness movement. I have so many experiences with Maharaj in Jane, in Chicago, here in London. Everyone has been very instructive for me and very sweet. I miss Maharaj a lot. When he left, for me, I was like, my thought was, I'm going to go to Mindfulness University there. I actually couldn't accept the fact that he was gone. It wasn't possible for me. And it took me a while to get over that. I don't know if I actually got over it, but finally come to the understanding that it's different than the way I was thinking. But actually, this is how I was feeling. That I would see him again somewhere, preaching, inspiring devotees, and touching the hearts of so many people in such a deep way that brought them to Krishna consciousness and attracted them to hear this personality is really, really the embodiment of everything we know about what is a Vaishnava in the true sense of the word. So, to glorify Bhakti Charu Maharaj is not possible. We can try, but we always fall short. His glories are unlimited. His deeds that he did in order to spread Krishna consciousness are amazing. Are truly amazing. And one thing that was really unique that he did, I don't know if I want to change the mood, but he did this boat ride. You remember that? And this was this boat ride coming from Southampton, I think it was. We left on Southampton. And we're thinking, what is this? This is interesting. Going from country to country, going Harinam on a tourist boat with 250 other people who were not devotees. And so when I got there, one of the first persons that I came in contact with was Radhanath Swami. And Radhanath Swami wanted to really enlighten us about what we're about to go into. So he said, you know, just about a year ago, this same boat has a sister ship. And that boat was in Italy, and it crashed. It sunk. And Southampton is the place where the Titanic left also. So this was our introduction to a week on the waves, you know. So we still went on. You know, Bhakti Charu Swami is fearless. You see things in the same way. But it was unique. It was interesting. It was adventurous. It was different in the sense that here was an interesting way to really reach people in such far-off areas in such a short period of time. It was just a wonderful experience, and we had so many wonderful kirtans and classes. And I remember Maharaj spoke Vrindavan Lila. He spoke Vrindavan Lila that time, and it was so deep, so sweet, and so full of his realizations of Krishna and Vrindavan. I had never heard him speak so intimately about Krishna and Vrindavan until then. Then I realized, you know, this person is really, really deep in his love for Krishna and Vrindavan. So thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak about Maharaj. My feeling towards Maharaj will be always that I can't wait again to somehow, if Krishna allows me to again be in his associations. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, thank you so much, Maharaj, for your sweet words. And I think His Holiness Bhakti Charu Maharaj did quite a few boat trips. One of them that I can remember is when I was maybe 7 or 8, and that day it ended up raining a lot. But there was about maybe 100, I can't actually remember where, but it was just the Thames, stationary, didn't really go anywhere. But Maharaj wanted to do this boat trip, but it was just stationary on the Thames, so we can say that we've done a trip on the Thames without actually leaving. So we were sat there, and Maharaj was telling us pastimes about Srila Prabhupada. He always used to love telling us about how he served Srila Prabhupada and how Srila Prabhupada has changed the entire world. So thank you so much, Maharaj, for reminding us about the boat trips, because that was one thing that I'd actually forgotten about, but it's so relevant to. Unfortunately, I wasn't there on the ones that you went to, but yeah, that boat trip was quite special. The next video, I'm hoping, is going to be about. It's going to be from His Holiness Radha Maharaj. Just a little introduction. On many occasions, I heard Bhakti Charu Maharaj mention that him and His Holiness Radha Maharaj are like two bodies but with one soul. And they were very, very close, brothers. And yeah, to be honest, I don't really want to say any more than that, because it's a sweet, loving relationship that they've had. And on the 4th of July last year, after we all heard about Maharaj, it was actually like a sweet balm, because the first person that we heard from was His Holiness Robert Maharaj. Yeah, so I'm not going to say any more, but you can start the video. Thank you.
Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirbhishesha Sunyavadi Paschyatyate Shatarine Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Brinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Today we are celebrating the Tirobhava, the disappearance day of His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj. Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj is truly one of the greatest devotees of this world. His life is something of history. When he first came to our movement, our beloved Guru Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada, personally took him in as a confidential associate, as a dear son. Srila Prabhupada entrusted him with the translations of all of his books in Srila Prabhupada's own native language and that of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Bengali. He also gave him the service of Srila Prabhupada's personal servant. How much Srila Prabhupada trusted the faith, the surrender, and the devotion of Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj. Srila Prabhupada showered his mercy and blessings upon him. And Srila Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj, after Srila Prabhupada's disappearance, dedicated his life to sharing that mercy with all the devotees of our movement and with the whole world. As Srila Prabhupada signed his letter, your ever well-wisher, I believe very deeply that Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj, he imbibed this ever well-wishing spirit of Srila Prabhupada and dedicated his life to be an instrument of Srila Prabhupada's divine grace. In my own life, he was truly a best friend, a dearmost God brother, a person who was filled with such wisdom and compassion. He was a mentor for me, and always a well-wisher, always encouraging me, always seeking to empower me. And I know he was like this in his relationship with most all of his god brothers, god sisters, disciples and followers who knew him well. So gentle, so humble, yet so fearless, so powerful. His beautiful kirtans would melt our hearts. His classes would fill us with Lord Sri Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda, and Prabhupada's mercy. How he developed the project in Ujjain, how he helped to develop the project in Mayapur Dham, how he developed the Abhay Charan television series that was viewed by tens and millions of people. He was the author of wonderful books. He's the embodiment of Vaishnav culture in how he prepared prasad and served prasad, and how he welcomed guests, and how he could make everyone feel that he was their best friend. Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj, at the time when Srila Prabhupada disappeared from this world, he was drowning in an ocean of separation. After all, his entire life within ISKCON was practically directly in Srila Prabhupada's association, offering personal service day and night. But in that mood of separation, he transformed. He transformed our movement and all of our devotees in so many ways, because he knew Srila Prabhupada's spirit so deeply. He personified, he embodied that spirit. The incredible devotional, compassionate accomplishments of Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj in his service and separation of Srila Prabhupada is an example, a lesson, which so perfectly guides us on our journey in love and separation. I cannot express the feeling of void, of loss, when such a friend, such a well-wisher, such a representative of my beloved Guru Maharaj departed from this world. But I do know that he's with Srila Prabhupada, and together Srila Prabhupada and Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj are very much with all of us. I have had so many prayerful experiences in remembrance of Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj that has given me great courage and hope, even in difficult times. Yes, in our love and separation from him, he is more present than ever in our hearts. It is for us to appreciate and recognize that. And it is for us to reciprocate with the sacrifice, surrender, in loving service that he offered to all of us. To the disciples of His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj and his followers, I congratulate you and I celebrate your incredible good fortune to have been touched by the mercy of such a Vaishnava. The Gaudiya Vaishnav Siddhanta, the Gaudiya Vaishnav tradition of loving devotional service, as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Nityananda Prabhu, and all our great acharyas taught, is embodied in the life, in the teachings, in the example of Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj. And although we are all sharing together the profound and almost impossible feeling of loss in his disappearance, in that shared experience, we can feel him, and together we can strive to please him in a way that he emphasized in everything he did, to make the community of ISKCON a wonderful, happy place where devotees could truly find shelter in the love of Vrindavan, as Srila Prabhupada has given us. His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj Ki Jai. Thank you very much.
Introduce the next project, which is Salakahan right now. It's on the song sheets, which Nilamon will sing.
this Tabakatamritam, it was very dear to His Holiness. And once he took us to Bhuvaneshwara, near Jagannath Puri, because when Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was, after huge kirtan, he was lying down, relaxing, and then King Prataparudra wanted to massage him. So he did massage him, and he sang this song, Tabakatamritam, to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who was in ecstasy hearing the song. So at that exact area, Maharaj was singing this song to us in 2001. And he explained that this song is a prediction of Srila Prabhupada. So it was very dear to Maharaj because these narrations are broadcast all over the world and are filled with spiritual power. Certainly those who spread the message of Godhead are most munificent. So he was indicating that the gopis were predicting that personalities will be coming to spread the message of love of God. And that's why it was very dear to him. And he explained this is the prediction of Prabhupada. So today is the day that they have opened up Maharaj's Samadhi in Mayapur town. And we're going to show you images of that beautiful Samadhi, which was sponsored and built by Amrish Prabhu and his wife, made of Makrana marble and has very intricate designs. And also there's a design of Varshana, which was very dear to Maharaj's heart. So whenever we can go to Mayapur Dham, we've been longing to go, please come and visit this beautiful Samadhi, which is next to Tamal Krishna Maharaj's Samadhi, Gaur Govinda Maharaj's Pushpa Samadhi, and Bhakti Charu Swami's Samadhi.
What is the teachings of Sri Chaitanya? What is the scripture saying about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's identity has been revealed in Srimad Bhagavatam. Krishna Varnam, Disha Krishnam, Sangapangastra Parshadam, Yaggai Sankirtana Prayair, Jajantihi Sumedhasaha. Jajantihi Sumedhasa. So, Jajanti means worship. Sumedhasha means those who are extremely intelligent. Those who are extremely intelligent, they will worship Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu how? Jaggai Sankirtana Prayavir. So, this is the Vaidhi Bhakti, Shastra Vidhi. What is the Shastra Vidhi? Worship Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu by Sankirtan Yajna. So you follow the Vaidhi Bhakti, worship Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and as I pointed out, just do that, and I can assure you the door to Vrindavan will open up in front of you. In due course of time, one fine morning or maybe in the afternoon, you'll find yourself in Vrindavan. Just like Gop Kumar in Brihad Bhagavatamrita, he arrived in the afternoon. He found himself in Vrindavan all of a sudden. And that's how he actually met Krishna. He had to wait for some time. He came in the afternoon. He was searching for Krishna. Then finally he saw Krishna in the evening, when it was just about to be evening, Godhuli. All of a sudden he saw everyone is looking in one direction. Then he heard that the dust was flying. And then he heard the mooing of the cows. Then he heard the laughter of the boys. And then he saw all the cowherd boys. So someday, if we follow this very simple process that Srila Prabhupada gave us, following Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we'll find ourselves in Vrindavan. So this is the teachings of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare.
Like Chandramouli Swami, I too was nervous in Bhakti Charu Maharaj's company, and for good reason. Yes, I do weddings, yes, I do samskars, and I thought I knew everything. And it's good that when you think you know everything, you have God brothers and sometimes God sisters to correct you. So I was doing an initiation ceremony for Maharaj, wearing a Harinam chadar. And I thought I looked pretty cool. I thought I had it down, pretty Vrindavan. Had the knot behind me, you know. And I had the Harinam chadar coming down behind. And he caught me just before I sat down and he said, I hope you're not going to sit on the holy name of Krishna. And I never forgot that. And as God brothers and God sisters of each other, can I suggest that you're never too big to be caught by a God brother? And that when you do get caught by a God brother or God sister, you respond with humility. Another time, I was very privileged to discover Bhakti Charu Maharaj's now legendary punctuality by being late. He was going on a preaching program. He said, would you like to come on this program with me? I said, yes, please, Maharaj. I arrived late. Gosh, I never did that again. When I was 21, I was a brahmachari. Difficult to believe. But I used to sell Srila Prabhupada's books. And in those days, we didn't have any such thing as a mobile phone. We had what they used to call, and I know you won't believe it now, we had telephone boxes. Telephone boxes. And in the countryside, where you couldn't find a telephone box, we used to go into a shop. And if the shops were closed, we would go into a pub. So sometimes I would go in dressed like this, bright orange. And one evening in November in 1977, when I was 21, I went in to report my scores, and I received the devastating news that Srila Prabhupada had passed away. But at the very same time, the whole pub erupted in laughter. So as I was hearing, because they were looking at me in my dhoti, and they were prodding, making jokes. So as I received the news of Prabhupada's passing, the whole world around me was laughing. So what a curious juxtaposition of humor and great sadness. Not a good situation, but is it ever a good situation to hear of the passing of your spiritual master? The whole world stops for you, and you become very surprised that the whole world, for other people, just goes on, just continues. And what do you do with those feelings? You look at other people and you think, do they not know what a serious and terrible event has just taken place? So I know that it is still recent for you, and I extend to you my deepest condolences and sympathies. I had a deep conversation with Bhakti Charu Maharaj on one of his visits some years ago, just after his heart scare issue. And he said that he didn't worry so much about death, because when it came, he was going to be just grateful that he'd had an opportunity to serve. Acharya is a word that we use very sparingly in our Krishna consciousness movement. There are 2 or 3 meanings of the word Acharya, and one of them means the head of the institution. So Bhakti Charu Swami is the safeguarding person of Srila Prabhupada's position as the Acharya of the institution. He would never ever dream of taking that title himself. But the word Acharya is actually related to the word Achara, one who behaves, one who walks, one who teaches by his own example. And means a stream, a river that flows in a particular way. Like Chandramouli Swami, I often become nervous in the presence of those who are in the mode of goodness. Well, you didn't say that, but I'm saying it. When I was in Bhakti Charu Swami's presence, I was wondering, how does he manage to stay in the mode of goodness all the time? I'm sure he can see right through me. Isn't it? You had that experience? He's looking at me now and he's understanding where my mind is. So I also had that experience. Achinoti ishastrartam acharya stapayatyapi swayamacharate yasmad acharya stena kirtita. That's an acharya, one who teaches by example. He studied and understood the meaning of scriptures. He establishes this meaning in the behavior of others, and he practices what he preaches. So the Acharya does not simply teach, but he shows by example. Somebody who knows a subject is known as a Vidvan. Someone whose life is based on that subject, but who doesn't teach it, is known as Anushtata. Someone who has realization of the subject that he does teach to others is called Anubhavi. Someone who teaches, but doesn't set an example, is called a Pracharaka. But an Acharya is one who does all of those. In the first sarga of Raghuvamsa, Vashishta Muni is described as a Kulapati. It means someone who's in charge of many, many students. Later on, the Guru, who had 10,000 students in his Gurukula, was known as a Kulapati. And he also fed them all. Yo anadanadi poshanad adhyapati. He who feeds his students, nurtures his students, and teaches his students. That is the definition of a Kulapati. So an Acharya is one thing, but a Kulapati is the head of many other Acharyas. So how appropriate that Maharaj became the Kulapati of thousands of disciples based in that ancient town of Avanti. And that this legacy, the Avanti school in which we're now gathered, also feeds thousands of pupils. The medieval poet, philosopher, and Vaishnava guru Vedanta Deshika is a highly regarded Acharya of the Sri Sampradaya. His teachings were incorporated into the teachings of the Hari Bhakti Vilas. He supplies the qualities of the Guru. I'm going to read out a few, and you tell me if you think Bhakti Charu Maharaj matches this description. Sat Sampradaya Siddham. He is firmly established in the Sampradaya. Yes? Stiradiyam. His mind remains firmly fixed, even in debates based on deceitful reasoning. Anagam. He is free from sin and never swerves from Shastra. Shrotriyam. He's fully conversant with the scriptures. Brahmanishtam. He has resolute devotion to God, free from blemishes. Yes. Sattvastam. He is dominated by Sattvaguna. Satyavacham. He's free from lies and he always tells the truth. Samaya Niyataya Sadhuvritya Sametam. He is expert at religious practices. Damba Anushayi Muktam. He exhibits no inauspicious characteristics such as egotism or jealousy. I'll let you go, but disciple makes the Guru well known. He preserves his legacy and extends his fame. This is a Vedanta Deshika's description of a disciple, someone who makes his Guru famous. So, His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj made Srila Prabhupada famous. Famous by being a good disciple, famous by making a TV series of his life, famous for writing a book about him, famous as a by translating Srila Prabhupada's books into the Bengali language so that millions of Bengalis could take up Krishna consciousness. He was so trusted and appreciated by Prabhupada. I was in Mayapur one time and having some rooibos tea with His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami in his room. And inevitably the conversation fell to talking about guru issues in ISKCON. And at one point in the conversation he told me that many years previously His Holiness B.R. Sridhar Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada's godbrother, had taken him into his confidence and asked him to become the Acharya of the Chaitanya Saraswat Math. He said, I thought about it briefly and then I politely declined. But I wasn't surprised to hear that Maharaj had been chosen. Who would not want Maharaj on his team? He knew the various threats to ISKCON in its years after Srila Prabhupada. And that booklet about Prabhupada, our preeminent Shiksha Guru, was largely his creation. And he distributed it. In fact, I was in Mayapur when he was personally ripping open the box and handing out copies of this book to everyone. If you do not already know the contents of that book, please do read it. So that is the past, but the future of Krishna consciousness movement owes a lot to Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj. He was responsible for helping to train the next generation of gurus, and what better place to do it? It began in Ujjain, or Avanti, where the Kulapati Guru, Sandipani Muni, resided. And he was always kind to me. When I went there at Ujjain, he made sure that I had tulsi leaves and flowers and fruits every morning delivered to my room by a super enthusiastic brahmachari so that I could do puja. Such a rare person who gave so much. What do we do now? What do we do? COVID is subsiding. We are protected a little bit. But what do we do in his absence? The feeling of separation has not subsided. And there's no mask that we can wear to protect ourselves from that. When I was 20, I was in a small group of devotees who were ushered into Prabhupada's room at Bhaktivedanta Manor. There was maybe 12 or 15 of us. And Prabhupada looked at everybody in the eyes and said, thank you, thank you, thank you for helping me spread this movement. I felt appreciated, fully connected to him and his mission. I felt loved and empowered and fully rewarded for my small service to him. And I felt he was truly grateful. Those few words of thanks have kept me going for 45 years. I have replayed them in my mind many times. Can I suggest that you also consider in your mind regularly anything your Guru Maharaj said to you, classes that he gave that were especially meaningful to you, things that he said to other devotees that are especially instructive to you. And please ask yourself in the coming years the following questions. Number one, what was the behavior of Guru Maharaj that convinced you that he was a genuine sadhu, someone worth giving your heart to? Number two, what was the class or the conversation that you had with him or heard that finally convinced you that he was the spiritual master for you? And number three, what words to you or to others encouraged you when you felt down? These are the things I feel that you need to remember over the coming years, because it is easy to become dispirited. His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami was Krishna's arrangement for Srila Prabhupada. Krishna sent Bhakti Charu Swami to help Srila Prabhupada. He needed someone. He needed a Bengali. He needed an intelligent, compassionate, thoughtful, caring and advanced Bengali to carry on the mission. But you should also know that Bhakti Charu Maharaj was sent by the Lord as a gift to you to help him to carry out the mission. He sent him to you at the right time when your soul cried out for salvation. He was the answer to your deepest prayers. Now please don't let those precious moments slip by into history. Remember them, and please work together to serve him by making this Krishna consciousness successful. We saw a beautiful cake, on the way in Maharaj's life. We have to think that if we pass tomorrow, what will be on our cake? What contribution will be on our cake? What is it that we have done to extend the mission of Your Guru Maharaj forward on into the future? And it's not just chanting rounds or reading the Bhagavad Gita. That's for you. These are things that we do. What did you do for him? What's on your cake? What's on the top of your cake? Start creating that cake now. Every one of you can play a vital part, and it will make your Guru Maharaj so proud if you do.
Thank you very much, Kripamoya Prabhu. So now it's near to 12 o'clock, so they're going to offer these preps. Because Srila Prabhupada always said at 12 o'clock, that's when you offer the bhoga to the spiritual master. So there'll be a few devotees who'll be doing that right now. And I'd like to introduce another speaker that we have today. He's Grace Vishwambara Prabhu, if you'd like to come up. Prabhuji is a congregational leader at Bhaktivedanta Manor, a warrior for book distribution, and a senior disciple of His Holiness Tamal Krishna Maharaj, and he knew Bhakti Charu Swami very well. And I'd like to introduce you. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, thank you for inviting us. We received about 7, 8 invitations in the past few days. Different disciples, they said, Guru Maharaj really loved you, you have to come. Usually on Saturday I go out on book distribution, but this is an important day. This is my book distribution today, to offer my few words to His Holiness Bhakti Charu Maharaj. I was reflecting on all the beautiful presentations that they were given today on screen and alive. And something stuck up that really impressed me in the life of Maharaj, that more than many leaders in ISKCON, they had actually, and that was the inclusiveness and the quality of being peacemaker in ISKCON. He would bring back many of the estrayed God brother that for some reasons they distantiate themselves from the movement, and Maharaj would bring them back to include them in the family of Srila Prabhupada. Also, he was very concerned, not just of the present devotees and where ISKCON is going, but also from the past, what we did wrong. And he was very expert on trying always to make peace. I think a few years ago there was a GBC meetings in Ujjain. He was the host, and he brought peace and armistice between a GBC with other GBCs. And the whole sessions of the meetings was all about that. But it was a great glue, a great example of how much he cared for devotees who are feeling alienated. He had a love for everyone, for all of you. That's why you are here, because you felt, and you still feel, his love. I personally felt. One time he told me, Vishwambar, you can look at someone and you can tell if that person likes you or not. And then you can speak to someone and that you can tell if that person, he likes you or not. So looking and hearing. But he said higher than that is to feel. He said, I've always felt your love towards me. I remember these words in Mayapur. Yes, I've always felt love from Maharaj, but when he passed away, I felt so bad that in 35 years that we've known each other, I never had the good fortune to express these 3 words to him, that Maharaj, I love you, and I love you, I still love you, and I know you are not gone. The sun set, you see the sun today, but it will set at some point, but it's not gone. The sun is somewhere else. So he's carrying on his message of peace somewhere else to some other people on behalf of Lord Krishna. I was actually, by some good karma, good luck, when Bhagavan left, I was his first servant when he came to UK. Before he had any disciples, for 1 month I was, somehow or another, he asked Kandari Prabhu, I need a brahmachari. I was temple resident in Leicester at that time, and Kandari Prabhu didn't want any devotees from the manor to miss out a book distribution, in those days there was very few. I came down to get some books for Leicester Yatra, and that's when I saw Bhakti Charu Swami on the stairs, my very first encounter. And he had these beautiful eyes, and he looked at me, by closing them, and he had a smiling, serious face, but smiling eyes. And then he asked, what's your name? And that's how we introduced each other. And I was serving him for 1 month. Kandari Prabhu said, if you could look after Maharaj just for a few days. But I ended up for 1 month. And then when I left Maharaj, he felt so bad. He said, I took you away from book distribution, you were supposed to benefit so many conditioned souls, but you gave up your time, to serve me. I never forget that. So I said, Maharaj, please put your hands on my head, and the marathon is coming, so I can survive. My English was not very good at that time. I could hardly speak English. You remember Pranabandhu? Book distribution has been my school. I've learned English distributing books. And that year, I remember, it was 1987. Bhagavan left 86. And I won a marathon that year. And I remember it must have been the mercy of Bhakti Charu Swami. I felt. Then he came again with Tamal Krishna Maharaj, and I was serving both of them. We were doing all this Ekadasi in the night. And I felt so fortunate, to be in their association. Once Bhakti Charu Maharaj left the room, Prabhupada room, to go to the toilet, and Tamal Krishna Maharaj said, where is he gone? Where is he gone? I said, I don't know, maybe he went to the bathroom. And when he came back, after 2 seconds, 2 minutes, Tamal Krishna Maharaj said, where have you been? Bhakti Charu Maharaj, I missed you. It's been, it's been so long, you've been away. Every second is 12 years of separation. So he made a big thing, it was very jokingly, of course. So at the end of the life of Tamal Krishna Maharaj, he was the one appointing me, him and Shivaram Swami, to take charge of the bedding and the dressing of Tamal Krishna Maharaj, the last rites. I didn't know what to do. I was devastated. And he guided me word by word what to do. Even at the salt, put some more here, some more on the face. And then when I came out of the samadhi, of the pit, he hugged me. He said, that was a mountain of service. I was almost collapsing because all day without drinking, eating, and devastated. He put my head on his chest, and he said, cry, don't worry. And I wet his kurta with my tears. He said, don't worry, I'm always there for you. And then he's gone. Last year, Damodar Prabhu, is a good friend of mine, he phoned me up and he said, actually when I got a COVID the last year, I was in a bad shape. I said, my Guru Maharaj sends a lot to you and your wife. And I felt it. Maybe that love kept me alive. But he didn't make it himself. So he's missed by all of us very dearly. And I hope we will meet him again. For sure. We will meet him again. Hare Krishna.
Namo Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paskatyade Shatarine Vanchakalpataru Vaisha Kripa Sindhu Vacha Patitanam Pavanepyo Vaishnavepyo Namo Namaha. My dear devotees, it is my great privilege to address you today on the occasion of the festivities of glorifying Bhakti Charu Maharaj. I must say that as I first heard this request, I noticed that still I had not totally overcome my sadness, which came because of his unexpected departure. Therefore, I will glorify him today from this angle. Actually, tragedy came in the life of Maharaj at a very early time. He was only 7 years old when the family separated from his mother, who had a contagious disease. And Maharaj describes what happened when he actually went into the room where the mother who had departed, the body, was lying there. We arrived at the house to find several relatives gathered, all looking grave. Upstairs, our mother was laid out on her bed, her eyes closed, flower garlands around her neck and colorful bouquets surrounding her body. Her face was decorated with sandalwood paste, and a bright red sindura dot marked the center of her brow. She looked so beautiful. I thought so peaceful, as if she were sleeping. At some point, I felt a gentle hand on my shoulder and was ushered out of the room and into the living room. I heard some of my relatives start to cry, but I couldn't look at anyone. I just stood at the window, staring out at the next door garden, That's when it all came to me. Tears streamed from my eyes and I broke down sobbing. I would never see my mother again. Maharaj described earlier how his mother was very pious and taught him about Rama and Krishna, puja, and so on, and how to live according to the tradition. He says, my mother's passing affected all the circumstances of my life. Srila Bhakti Charu Swami took full shelter. First he looked for God, and when he found in Srila Prabhupada the representative of the Supreme Lord, his eternal spiritual master, he surrendered entirely, like a little child, to his mother or father. Bhuijan Prabhu remembers a meeting with Bhakti Charu Maharaj, where he said to Maharaj, you choose to paint as the cover of the book a picture of your heart. He didn't answer with a long sentence. He only cited a soft and thoughtful yes. Here you see on the cover of the book an insight into Maharaj's soft Vaishnav heart. Srila Prabhupada takes a little boy, that is Maharaj, to Goloka Vrindavan. Once Maharaj shared with us in a lecture, live in such a way that the whole world will want you. Die in such a way that the entire world will cry for you. But this is only one aspect of Maharaj, an aspect which is difficult to ignore 1 year after his sudden departure. There is another aspect which comes to mind. What he learned from Srila Prabhupada. Once, when Prabhupada was not well, he had asked Bhakti Charu Maharaj to cook for him, but he wouldn't be able to eat the food. And one day he said, you can see that I can't eat anything. Still, why are you cooking? You have so many things to do. Why are you wasting your time to cook for me? Maharaj said, well, Prabhupada, I hope that one day you will be better and then you will eat and this will give you strength. And Prabhupada answered, I will get better only when I leave this world. Naturally, Maharaj broke down crying. And then he remembers Prabhupada's response. Something which I would like you all take to heart. Prabhupada said in a very soothing voice, is this what you learned from me? Is this what I taught you? Didn't I teach you that the spirit soul is immortal and never changing? It is only the body that changes and finally dies when the soul leaves the body. This understanding that we are spirit souls who just go through our life's journey and who should make that life journey as, let us say, good as possible. That is Maharaj's constant teaching to us. And I think it is a good starting point for my second part of this little presentation. That is his teachings, through which we can remain connected with him always. I have a very beautiful source of information that is his own words in something he wrote to Srila Prabhupada. He said, he remembers, Prabhupada, you told me to offer this life to Krishna, and explained in detail how vicious this material world is and how precarious is our condition here. I naturally resolved to do that with a grateful heart, and you allowed me to taste the ecstasy of the spiritual mass, a spiritual life. To close all the doors behind me, you decided to give me sannyas. However, at that time, some leading devotees expressed their apprehension about my getting sannyas so quickly, but you stayed firm in your decision and assured them about your confidence in me. Yes, Prabhupada made our Bhakti Charu Maharaj a true back to Godhead man, and that removes all the clouds of sorry and worry, because for sure he is where Prabhupada took him by the hand. I could always see this determination in Maharaj. And I still remember when Srila Prabhupada was still amongst us during a Mayapur festival. I was walking in the long building, not actually in, but outside on the street. All of a sudden I heard someone address me in German, and I looked around and saw no German was there. It was Maharaj who spoke to me with a perfect Hamburg accent. That's the town in which Maharaj did his studies in physics. Hallo, Alter. That means a certain way to greet, which is specific just to this town. We instantly bonded. Maharaj invited me to come to his room, and we discussed many things and became friends. But that is not surprising, because who could not be charmed by Maharaj and consider him his very, very good friend. Prabhupada took an early interest in Maharaj, made him his secretary for his Indian affairs, and always had time to see him and speak to him. Maharaj was so much charmed by Srila Prabhupada that he really felt himself like the dependent son. And he did not stop to feel, let us say like this, he always reminded all of us and the entire movement that we must never ever stop to follow the footsteps of Prabhupada and be very mindful of Srila Prabhupada's position. But he loved Srila Prabhupada very much. And when Prabhupada had left, he often confided in me that his greatest desire was to join Srila Prabhupada as early as possible. He writes about this mood of separation. When you left this planet, your instruction remained as my guiding beacon. Although my heart ached with constant agony due to your separation, I tried to remember that you were always there. At that time, I used to imagine that just as a mother sometimes hides while teaching her son to walk, she may hide behind a curtain, urging him to start walking by searching for her. Similarly, you are hiding behind some invisible curtain so that I will search for you and thus develop my ardent desire to go where you are. My dear devotees, today I want to also give you a little homework. Let us become mindful of this great being, this wonderful disciple of Srila Prabhupada who walked amongst us. And let us grow up just like the child who hears from somewhere the message or the Vani, the voice of the mother. He may not see the mother, but the mother's sound comes to his ear. Get up, start walking, go around this obstacle and come towards me. This is something which all of us can take into our heart. Let us hear the message of Bhakti Charu Maharaj. Come, learn to get up on your legs, walk, and surely we will meet again. I thank you very much, and I wish you all the best. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srila Bhakti Charu Maharaj ki jai, Gaur Premanandi, Hari Hari Bol.
Om Ajana Timarandasha Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshu Umlitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swaya Rupa Gadamayam Dadati Swaha Badantekam Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, everybody. And it's a little bit of a bittersweet talk today, insofar as sweet because it's glorification of the ever wonderful Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj, and a little bitter because he's no longer physically present with us, and for us to see his smiling face and enthusiastic persona. However, it is an honor to address you all today and to speak a few words to glorify Maharaj. Bhakti Charu Maharaj Association reminds me of what we learn from the very beginning of the Krishna book. And I'll just read a few sentences from the beginning, actually. Of the first chapter, The Advent of Lord Krishna, Srila Prabhupada writes, as stated in the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, Tena Brahma Hridaya Adikavaya, the transcendental knowledge of the Vedas was transmitted to Lord Brahma through the heart. Here also, in the same way, only Brahma could understand the message transmitted by Lord Vishnu. And he broadcast it to the demigods for their immediate action. The message was this: the Supreme Personality of Godhead would appear on the earth very soon, along with his supreme, powerful potencies. And as long as he remained on the earth planet to execute his mission of annihilating the demons and establishing the devotees, the demigods should also remain there to assist him. They should all immediately take birth in the family of the Yadu dynasty, wherein the Lord would also appear in due course of time. So that section from the Krishna book, I was reminded of that, thinking of Bhakti Charu Maharaj. Because who knows who Bhakti Charu Maharaj was in his previous life, but for certain his humility, his purity, his loyalty and his dedication to Srila Prabhupada were surely such compelling attributes in him being chosen as one of Srila Prabhupada's demigods, if you like. Indeed, maybe Srila Prabhupada's what you might say Adi demigod. Because there's no doubt that Srila Prabhupada, when adventing himself and fulfilling the mission of Lord Chaitanya for the holy names to be spread to every town and village, he needed assistance. He needed empowered assistance to help him achieve that. And there is no doubt in my mind that Srila Bhakti Charu Maharaj is one of those most potent and most powerful assistants that came to help Srila Prabhupada. And in addition to those same qualities which resulted in a glorious devotional life in ISKCON for Bhakti Charu Maharaj, but also now a legacy that will live for longer than I guess all of us put together many times over. Also, as stated in the Hari Bhakti Vilas, it's quoted there, Lord Krishna speaking to Arjuna, and he says, Shradaya hevala nama ratanti mam janatvaha. That Lord Krishna says, oh Arjuna, in my heart I always chant the names of those with firm faith in chanting my holy name. So I think we can also take great solace on that from that statement that Lord Krishna is also today chanting Bhakti Charu Maharaj's name, just as we are, and glorifying his wonderful devotee. Bhakti Charu Maharaj, he was such, I learnt so much from him actually. He was such an incredible listener. He was so patient, he was so thoughtful and kind-hearted, and actually not just kind-hearted, but extremely soft-hearted. In addition to that, he was very mild-mannered, he was warm, he was consoling, he was friendly, he was enthusiastic. It would be very hard for me actually not to associate all of the 26 qualities of a devotee, all of the 26 qualities of a Vaishnava. Very hard for me not to associate all of those qualities with Bhakti Charu Maharaj. However, whatever about his personal qualities, which were glorious, Maharaj was also ever ready to set those aside in the service of his beloved spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, and of course, his beloved spiritual master's glorious mission, ISKCON. And at all times, when needed, he was ready to show his leadership acumen to the highest degree, even if, in some respects, you could argue that what was required at different points in time were sort of outside his comfort zone, if you like, in terms of those qualities that I've just mentioned. And for me, an example, which was quite a recent example prior to Maharaj's departure, just a year or two in that sense, 2-3 years before his departure. And that was the experience that I had with him in Brooklyn, in New York City, which of course, it's no coincidence in many ways that that's where Srila Prabhupada actually started his ISKCON movement, started the Hare Krishna movement in New York City. And without getting into all the details, I would just say, at one point in time, in the pastime of Brooklyn a few years back in New York, Maharaj, he very much exemplified that proverb that Prabhupada would quote sometimes, saying that someone had the heart of a Bengali mother and the courage of a lion. And I think that was so attributable to Bhakti Charu Maharaj in this particular situation, when he literally led the charge in Brooklyn. You know, we could even possibly use the term Brook Lion. He was so courageous in what he did, because he volunteered to deliver the removal notice to the incumbent at that time in front of all the incumbent supporters. That's literally going into the lion's den, and can be a very challenging situation. As soon as he did that, began to do that, the electricity was promptly switched off, which meant the microphone that Maharaj was using was also switched off. But just as a candle in a windless night, Maharaj remained steadfast and was unaffected by those externals, and remained both fearless and resolute in purpose. And of course, he won the day. Glorious, glorious example. So I, along with all the devotees across the planet today, and not just today, I guess, but certainly today, will ever remember and be ever indebted to the extraordinary contribution that Bhakti Charu Maharaj has made to this world. His lasting legacy will surely be how much we all embrace his example as a perfect Vaishnava gentleman, and his absolute loyalty and dedication and constant service to his Guru and his Guru's mission. On a personal note, for me, Bhakti Charu Maharaj is and will remain my guiding light in life. And I know as long as I can keep sight of him and hang on to his coattails, my life will also be successful, and probably more successful than I could ever have dreamed of. So, thank you for everything, Maharaj. Thank you, thank you, thank you for being such a wonderful guide, and for this lowly soul, such a dear, dear friend who I could always rely on and always call on whenever I was facing challenging times. So really, from the bottom of my heart, Maharaj, I really want to thank you for your sweet, sweet friendship. And yes, I'm missing your Vapu. I'm really, really missing it. How could I not miss that? It's a big wrench, actually, and it's a big hole in, not just mine, I'm sure for many, but I'll speak for myself, a big hole in our lives. Just not to have you there anymore, as I say, in your personal form like that. And, you know, for souls like me who are not so advanced, always exclusively having to rely on your Vani, you know, it's that's a little more challenging. Your Vapu was just so sweet and so instant, and had such an impact on me right from the very get-go. But still, I'm so grateful to be able to still take shelter in your Vani, and most of all, I'm able to cherish all of the wonderful memories that you so kindly allowed me to be part of. I will never forget those, Maharaj. I thank you so much for them, and I just want to honour you today as best as I possibly can. And I just hope and pray that in the service of Srila Prabhupada and in the service of Lord Krishna, that I will get your personal Vapu association someday in the future. Thanks again, Maharaj, and it's just a wonderful privilege to be able to participate in your memory today. And that really proves your legacy, that there are so many devotees around the world who are constantly remembering you and constantly missing you, feeling separation from you, but in the mood of Vipralambar Seva, that through separation, the personal association, whenever it may happen in the future, I know will be sweeter than it's ever been in the past. Thank you, Maharaj. All glories to you, all glories to your wonderful service, and I fall at your feet. Hare Krishna. Srila Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Sundar Lala Sachi
He's a legend. I'm just going to say that. He's a legend. He's kept, with his good wife, Radha Landanishwara, strong, the temple itself, the community strong in the last 14 years and more. It's sad that he's going to pass that responsibility on to a new team, but it means that he's able to travel more and give his time more to the congregation. He's a legend. He's an amazing speaker, well-balanced, devotee, mature, and he's given his life to Krishna, and he's a disciple of His Holiness Radha Swami. I'd like to warmly welcome His Grace, Nitai Kirtan. Nitai Prabhu Ki. Sorry, Nitai.
Nitai Kirtan Prabhu Ki. Is Nitai Kirtan Prabhu here? Hare Krishna. So I feel like a mosquito amongst elephants. Here I've been asked to speak, and I don't know anything about legend, but I'm very honored to be here on this occasion with all of you exalted personalities. So I've written something, so I'll just share that and try to keep it as short as possible so that we can move on with the program. Om Gyanatiminam Dasya Vinanjana Shanakaya Chakshuramanikamya Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Vanshakapatirubhyascha Kripasindhubhye Vishnapatirana Bhavaneyo Vaishnaveyo Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Swami Niti Namane Srimati Bhakti Charu Swami Niti Namane. What can be said about such a person who dedicates their entire life to the service of God and to others? He is simply perfect. These great souls are very rare beings of divine inspiration who walk this earth with the sole purpose of leading and guiding others with their every movement. His Holiness Bhakti Charu Maharaj was such a source of inspiration in so many ways. The way that he carried himself, the way that he walked with such grace, always a spring in his step, like a swan. It was as if he floated on air and was carried by the grace of the Lord's energy, like a transcendental messenger. He always reminded me of Narada Muni. When he would speak, only the sweetest of sound vibration would emanate from his mouth, and there was never any need for callous or rough language. And always with a smile, or his laugh. Maharaj would laugh, so enticing and so endearing. Also so generous and giving. His time, the most valuable of commodities, and he would share it with devotees in such a way that everyone always felt that they were the most important person in his world. This for me is the sign of a true sadhu, or saintly personality. I've mentioned to devotees many times before what an inspirational role Maharaj played in my life, especially in the early days. The way I would see him interact with my Guru Maharaj was one of the deepest, most profound inspirations that led me to take more seriously the Krishna consciousness. Seeing the loving exchanges and dealings between these two souls filled a hole in my heart, and it exposed for me the possibility of a world, a society, a community that could actually love and care for one another deeply and profoundly on the spiritual platform. Later on, I was blessed to have an interaction that I will never forget, which was mentioned earlier at Bhakti Charu in 2006 in Sri Jagannath Puri. And I thought to share this because tomorrow is Snami Yatra Day here in Berlin, and of course in 2 weeks Rath Yatra. So it was after the Rath Yatra in 2006, which I was most amazingly blessed to be in attendance. And as some of us know, the carts park up outside of Gundicha Temple, and then all the pilgrims are given the opportunity to go on board the chariots for a super intimate and special darshan of Jagannath Baladev and Subhadra. As a Westerner, though, many of us were not allowed. So it was arranged that a group of us would come back in the evening at like 2 a.m. in the morning, and then the opportunity would be more possible. So basically, to make a long story short, we tried to board the chariots amidst the intensity of being beaten with bamboo sticks. Anyone who's ever done that, you know. It's real mercy to get a good wallop from one of the pandits. Anyway, I managed to get on board Subhadra Devi's chariot first. And it was so exciting. And I was directed towards her divine ladyship. And as I was approaching, I saw someone was in front of me, and they were embracing Lady Subhadra. And it looked as if she was also embracing him. The person was wearing saffron cloth, but it was 2 in the morning, so it was very dark, and I couldn't see who it was. But as I was waiting and thinking, maybe I will also get such mercy to embrace Subhadra Devi, the personality in front of me turned around, and it was His Holiness Bhakti Charu Maharaj. And he was beaming with this smile from ear to ear. And I immediately felt such ecstasy emanating from him. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. And as I stood there with my mouth hanging open, I felt so blessed. And then Maharaj shouted, Jai Nitai! And he embraced me. And with such a powerful, loving hug that I thought I would return to the spiritual world in that moment. Then he let go and he pushed me towards Lady Subhadra. And I also embraced Lady Subhadra, tried to with the same enthusiasm, certainly with no level of the same devotion as Maharaj. Anyway, it was an overwhelming experience that words can't really venture to grasp, but I'm so grateful to have had that special experience for which I feel deeply nourished and spiritually fulfilled. So I would like to thank you to His Holiness Bhakti Charu Maharaj for all the amazing loving support and encouragement that he's given to me, and he continues to give to so many devotees all around the world. His Holiness Bhakti Charu Maharaj Ki. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. The next speaker I would like to introduce is Yamuna Mataji. She first came to Krishna consciousness in 1988, where she met devotees at Soho Street Temple. In the same year, she met Bhakti Charu Maharaj, while everyone else was on book distribution. She got the opportunity to cook him pizza and cake, which became a little tradition over the years. And 1989, she took initiation on Nishingadev's appearance day, and from then to 1998, she travelled often around with him to Europe, and I'll pass it on to her to tell. Thank you.
I don't know where to start. Like she mentioned, I met Bhakti Charu Maharaj in 1988. And when I was at Soho Street, and they were asking me they were saying you should start thinking about who you want to take as a spiritual master. And I had a picture of Prabhupada in the ashram, and I would pray every day to please guide me, direct me. It wasn't long after the background had left, so obviously there was a lot of devotees that lost their spiritual master, so I'd really pray intently. And Guru Maharaj came through, and as soon as I saw him, I just felt something in my heart. And the god sister, Prema Lena, she had also approached him for re-initiation, and she received a letter from him we were at the manor one day and she showed me the letter. And as soon as I saw the letter, it basically he said that you know, my role is to be a transplant by meaning to take with Sri Prabhupada. And as soon as I read that letter, I just knew in my heart that he was the one. And then shortly after that, like she said, I got initiated. And then he used to stay at the house a lot. And this past time when the cake decorating thing began, I was studying the sitting guild and sugar craft skills. And whenever he would come to stay at our house, I was making the cake. So every time he would arrive, he'd look to see what the next cake was, and he'd have this like laugh. And then finally in 1995 in Medalago in Italy, I made his Yasapuja cake. And I did 8 cakes and I did the Guru Astakam prayers. And in those days, now it's very normal that everybody makes cakes, it's kind of common. Even when I look now, I think I've got a lot of training to do. But at the time, it was very new, and I made the Guru Astakam prayers and I made him on each cake and everything. And he called me up. He didn't want to cut it, he wanted to leave it for the Sunday feast guests for the day. And then in the evening, he finally called me up to explain the cake. And of course, me, dyslexic, not very good with all the Sanskrit and everything, I couldn't really explain the verses properly. But I remember going around each cake and finally got to the end cake. And I said, oh, that's sugar and rice, that's the topmost cake. So he took the moti out of sugar of him and gave it to me, and then distributed the cake. And he said to me at the time, how are you going to top that cake? And to be honest, I don't think I'll ever top that cake. And then many other disciples obviously doing lots of amazing things and cakes and everything. So, but finally I ended up in Ujjain, and I spent a few months in Ujjain. And at the time I was actually gone there, finished studying naturopathy and herbal medicine, and I went there to write. And when I arrived, he decided that he wanted me to teach everybody to do cake decorating. But I had no equipment, no ingredient, and so it proved very challenging. But I got to make for Michelada's appearance day, and then the next day was actually my birthday, and I'd sponsored the feast for Michelada's appearance day. So he said, well, you sponsor the feast, I'm going to make a cake for you, arrange a cake for your birthday. And when I'd arrived in Ujjain, when I had my first darshan with him, we had a talk, he pulled out his iPhone, and I made a comment about his iPhone. And he said to me, would you like it? And I just smiled, and he said, okay, you can have it. But a few days later, he'd been away and came back, and he said, how are you doing? And then he said, you don't need the iPhone now, do you? I said, no, very much. He said, okay. But then on my birthday, he introduced me to the Sunday feast in Hindi. I didn't know what he was saying. And he introduced this cake, and he handed me a present, and it was the iPhone. So I got this by heart right there. I know we're late, so
So our last speech is from the Pandava Sena. And the Pandava Sena is a youth organization of ISKCON in the United Kingdom. Started in January 1994. And from the start, His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami was always guiding, leading, and nourishing all of us. And he would always make it a point, whenever he came to England, he would say, I need one day with the Pandava Sena. He would always give us one day. And we're just insignificant youngsters when the older generation are looking at us and thinking, who are these kids hanging around with Maharaj, teenagers. But he knew the value of giving his association to us, because when he did that, and not only Maharaj, other Maharajas did that too, it nourished us, it made us strong, and to this day you'll see many senior leaders in our movement, like Sutapa Prabhu, Naveen Krishna, Buddha Bhavana Prabhu, Chiti Shakti, Nilamani, so many are from the Pandava Sena, nourished by so many devotees, and especially by His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami. So I'd like to warmly welcome Sadipan Krishna Prabhu and Ram Prabhu to come up and say a few words in glorification of Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. We are running a little bit late, and I asked Naveen, I said, can we cut this one? He said, no, you have to do it. So that's why I'm here. My apologies. You can blame him later, but I guess he built the school, so we're okay. Hare Krishna. On behalf of Pandava Sena, Ram and I were asked to speak. I guess I'm the ancient relic and past of PS and Ramachandra, our latest and bravest chairman. Italy had Mancini, England had Southgate, Manchester United had Alex Ferguson. Amazon had Bezos and Facebook had Zuckerberg. But Pandavasena have an elite leadership team sent personally by Lord Krishna and Srila Prabhupada. Bhakti Charu Swami was our leader, sent by Prabhupada, who transformed young hearts and minds. He personally guided us, trained us, allowed us to travel with him, tolerated us, led from the front with daring and exciting projects, corrected us and gave us instructions and a vision of how to reach people and how to share Krishna consciousness with all. We were confident, brave, and tried to be innovative because Gurudev was and encouraged us to be. Over to Ram, who played around Gurudev's lotus feet as a baby.
Hare Krishna. So we wanted to find a way to honor Bhakti Charu Swami and continue his legacy with Pandavasena. But we weren't quite as involved, so like our generation right now weren't quite as involved with Sena while Maharaj was preaching to them. So I spoke to a few people and they all told me the same thing. He desired that all of us were just to fight for Krishna, to use all our energy, all our creativity, and our desire to spread the message. He said that the youth were the ones that had the desire and energy to create a revolution. He wanted us to take over the world, not for us, but just for Krishna. Pandavasena cannot repay Bhakti Charu Swami for what he's done for us. He's given us an abundance of knowledge and also his blessings. All we can do is try our best to fulfill his desire. So please give us your blessings so that we may serve his desire to the best of our ability. Hare Krishna.
Aha.
Jai